Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in land conservation or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work, has an interesting story, and loves the American West. My guest today is Dan Prinsloo. Dan is the director of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the agency charged with managing wildlife, lands, natural resources, and outdoor recreation throughout the great state of Colorado. Dan started with the agency back in 1986 as a district wildlife manager and steadily worked his way up through the ranks, assuming the role of director in spring of 2019. Born and raised in Colorado, Dan has a lifelong love of recreating in the state's open spaces and wild places, and he's devoted his entire career towards protecting and managing them for the benefit of present and future generations. Dan and I were scheduled to meet at CPW's annual Partners in the Outdoors conference, an extremely popular gathering that brings together stakeholders from all corners of the conservation and outdoor recreation sectors. The conference has become the foremost opportunity for organizations, businesses, agencies, universities, and more to come together to find common ground and mutually beneficial solutions for balancing conservation and recreation here in Colorado. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic made the in-person conference impossible, but thankfully the amazing team at CPW was able to move the conference online, and this podcast is part of the new virtual conference. If you love spending time outdoors, whether here in Colorado or anywhere else, I know you'll glean lots of valuable information from this conversation. Dan and I spend the first half of the conversation discussing some of the specifics around CPW, the organization's history, the success of the Partners in the Outdoors Conference, CPW's important role in private land conservation, and CPW's role as a national leader in balancing conservation and recreation. During the second half of the conversation, we discussed Dan's personal backstory, why he decided to pursue public service as a career, his family's long history of service-minded work, and how he worked his way up to the role of director. Dan also shares many valuable leadership lessons, including the importance of humility, empathy, and surrounding yourself with a strong team. As usual, there's a ton of valuable information in this episode, so I encourage you to check out the episode notes for a full list of the topics we discussed and links to all the information we reference. And if you'd like more information on how you can participate in the virtual Partners in the Outdoors Conference, that link is in the episode notes as well. Thanks to Dan and his team at CPW for all their important work. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. People who are listening to this are from all over the country and even all over the world, which is wild. But maybe if you could start out just by giving a high-level overview of Colorado Parks and Wildlife and what y'all do and how you do it.
You bet. Ed, glad to do that. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife is a state agency under the Department of Natural Resources, and we manage all parks, state parks, all recreation, and all wildlife that is within the state's jurisdiction. There's some nuances in there with some things that are federally jurisdiction, Endangered Species Act, et cetera, but we have a role in all of that too. So we merged as an agency in 2011 with state parks and the old Division of Wildlife. We'd been married before in the 70s and were divorced in the 70s. And then there's lots of discussions as always about same thing, different thing. And so really we're working hard at being one agency, but we created a mission around both agencies, and it says we'll manage in perpetuity for the enjoyment of Coloradans visitors for wildlife for everybody, and managed outdoor recreation and state parks. And that's obviously a real roll up of what we do. But as a state agency, we've got 42 state parks, about 350 state wildlife areas. We manage about 960 wildlife species in the state of Colorado. And we have about 900 permanent employees. We got probably about 1,500 temporaries every year. It's really heavy on the state park side, and also on wildlife. When we're doing all the field work in wildlife, we need a lot of temps to pull on during the busy months. And then we probably have about 3,000 to 4,000 just the most dedicated volunteers you've ever seen in your life that work for us annually. So that's kind of a quick nutshell of what Colorado Parks and Wildlife is.
We could easily sit here and talk about all the different facets of the organization for hours and hours and hours. And maybe we might need to do a part 2 of this at some point. But the one thing that I really wanted to get focused in on that I think is super interesting, and I think it applies to the people who listen to this podcast, is your Partners in the Outdoors program, and specifically the Partners in the Outdoors Conference, where we are actually supposed to be today, I think, but it got canceled because of this pandemic. But it's such a unique program, and it focuses on finding this common ground between groups that maybe historically have not been on the same page. And so rather than me try to give my explanation of it, could you talk a little bit about Partners in the Outdoors and kind of how that program came to be?
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. I'm not even sure I can answer. I was working for then the Division of Wildlife when we started that concept. I'm going to say in 2008 or 9, but that's a guess. And the idea started around just kind of broadening our not just our base of support. It's much broader than just Colorado Parks and Wildlife, but we have volunteers, we have lots of partners, and we engage our partners on things that we're going to start to work on or are working on or that bubble up. But we thought it would be a good idea to really kind of formalize that we touch so many things in the state of Colorado. Like 92% of the residents in the state of Colorado recreate outside, or hunt, fish, or recreate. And so obviously we'll take what not everybody's a hunter or a fisherman, or not everybody's a rock climber, right? But everybody is living here to live life outside, and they move here and they live here, and it's a real visceral thing. You can see that even in this pandemic, Ed, that we're one of the few states that have stayed open in our state parks and wildlife areas. We had to close some camping. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on COVID because that's what everybody seems to talk about. Yeah. So let's kind of move to positive things. But the reality is we wanted to start just a real structured thing about how do we broaden our partnerships so we can work on mutual goals. And sometimes they're not always the same, but one day we need to be hand in hand, and another day we might have a different opinion. But last time I checked, it's been years, so don't quote me on this, but if I open Webster's dictionary, I think partnership's going to say something about kind of a mutual goal, but mutual risk and reward. And so those are daily occurrences in any business, any Colorado, any recreation, any entity. And so we started that. We want to cultivate, common ground where possible, explore, best practices for partnering. Obviously there are different voices and different stakeholders, but we're all really, I can't really find anybody that doesn't want to do a great job in conserving Colorado's outdoor heritage. So again, we created a partnership. It's really it's sad we're not there in Vail this week, but really is a signature event in Colorado, bringing together, all kinds of organizations, agencies, communities, businesses, schools and universities, kind of somewhat of a shared future in Colorado's conservation and our outdoor recreation. Last but not least, I'll just say the conference theme this year was going to be and is, how can we cultivate common ground to ensure a sustainable future for Colorado's outdoors? as we explore the complicated relationship between conservation and recreation in this state. And I'm glad to talk about that a little more, but that was the conference theme and is the conference theme. And as we're trying to, cobble together some synergy in our partners with our partners since we couldn't ever meet them.
And so when you think about the complexity of that, I mean, on the surface, it sounds the way it's written out in the conference materials and the way it's described, it's hard to argue with that, with trying to find common ground. It makes perfect sense, but it's complex and it's hard because there are people involved, and it's people have their own self-interest in mind, and they've done it the way they've done it for years and years and years. When you think about the challenges to finding this common ground, one of the things that sticks out in my mind is just the population growth here in Colorado, and it's people like me moving out here from North Carolina, and and it's when you look at the projections, the population's only going to continue to grow and grow, and through 2050, it's kind of staggering what they're saying is expected as far as population. How does that factor into CPW and your thoughts on the organization and where it needs to go?
Well, it's a good point, and now I know where that twang came from. You're talking to a Colorado born and raised. Yep. We are a fair, rare breed, and I should be on the endangered species. But I don't think it's a secret to anybody unless you just moved here and you think that this is the norm. I don't have great statistics. I'm not going to chase that rabbit down the hole, but I bet we have the infrastructure in the state of Colorado for about 1.5 million to 2 million residents, not 6 million residents. Mm-hmm. And really, outside the shoulder seasons, in the peak of the summer and the peak of the winter, we really have 8 million people in the state. There's about 2 million visitors any day of the week in the summer and the winter. And so we really just don't have the infrastructure for that. We do have the natural resources to be able to absorb that. That's a fantastic thing. But a lot of the places that people like to hike or hunt or fish, trailheads were built way before our population boom. And I forget, the state demographer can talk much more about it. But like you said, 2050 is talking about 8 or 10 million people, whatever it is. And so we really need to work on how to balance what we have, and not just in a shared balance. And we'll talk about that a little more. But how do you preserve what you really need to preserve? Iconic pieces of land, critical wildlife habitat. We have really, Colorado's been blessed with probably some of the most diverse and significant wildlife heritage than really any state in the nation. And I'll go on any podcast and do that. The West and Colorado specifically, we have by far and away the most elk than any state. That's just one species, but people come all over the country to observe, whether it's just observe on our national parks and national monuments and our forests, or to hunt elk. They just come from all over the world to do that. We have by far and away that population. And so we have a rich resource. We have people that want to partake in that, and we have to balance those. There's places that we should not be messing around with, a significant trailhead when it's elk calving ground. Mm-hmm. And we've got pretty good mapping on how to do that. The flip side of that is not everywhere in the state is great elk calving ground or critical nesting for white-crowned sparrows. So we need to work at balancing that conservation and recreation. And we'll talk again a little more about that, but we really don't have a state. I have all kinds of strategic plans. I could talk till I'm blue in the face about strategic plans. Those are bought in all the way up at the governor's level. But we don't have a statewide conservation plan. We don't have a statewide recreation plan that will roll that up. And that's one of the conversations that we're starting to have within this partnership.
No, that all makes perfect sense. And somebody on the outside hears CPW, they may think, all right, they manage hunting and they manage parks. But you guys are also a very trusted and important partner in land conservation, which is my job when I'm not doing this podcast. And could you talk a little bit about CPW's commitment to conservation and how you guys, some of the different programs that you guys fund to kind of keep this state in the pristine condition that we love it in?
Absolutely, and thanks. That's a great tee up. And I'll probably miss 90% of them, but I'll quick shout out to my partners at GOCO, Chris Castilian and Emily and staff. That they're just wonderful partners too. So they help fund some of that. But we'll start off first. We have a yearly on the wildlife side. It's called a request for proposal, but we advertise statewide for landowners to apply if they want to for a conservation easement, or for us to buy at fee title, which we don't do very much fee title anymore. So that's an annual program, and in the last few years, it's been as high as 25 or 30 million annually. This year, I think we're around 11 million. I don't know another entity in this state that is dedicating that kind of funding for, it's more than seed money to do land conservation for the benefit of Colorado in perpetuity, to preserve that land, to keep landscape, to keep working ranches on the landscape, to keep agriculture on the landscape, to keep those landscapes in order. And that's what conservation easement can do. And so I'll stand up to anybody. We have a robust program. That's just one of them in land conservation. So we work with our NGO partners in cities, counties, and state entities, federal partners on that, and of course, private landowners. Also have a rich and storied history, and it's not just history. We're working hard every day about, wildlife conservation. People think, well, Parks and Wildlife. They have hatcheries and put out fish, to catch, or they manage elk hunting, like I talked about. Well, let's roll back in a quick history lesson that when the West was won, for lack of a better term, which was pretty devastating to wildlife populations, devastating to Native Americans too. But elk were decimated, the bighorn sheep were decimated. If we even had many turkeys there, market hunting took those out. We had disease issues, etc. So I'm just going to. I just been thinking about this for about 10 seconds. The state of Colorado Division of Wildlife has restored elk along with our private and national Forest Service. So we've restored elk, bighorn sheep, turkey. Those are all hunting species, but we've restored lynx on the landscape, black-footed ferrets. The most we're still working on that, but it's getting better. The most rarest mammal left in the world, black-footed ferret. Prairie chickens in Colorado, river otter, native cutthroat trout. I could continue down that list. And so we are working on the recreation side, hunting side, conservation side. All of it's conservation. People ask all the time, well, what does that mean? And conservation is the wise use of our resources. But use is we're all using our resources. People that hike on a trail and think, well, I don't hunt, or I don't fish, or I don't bother anybody because I'm just on that trail, or quite frankly, I hate to use the word, but I will, naive, that everybody, including me sitting at a desk today, has a footprint on this state, whether the resources you're using for the electricity, for the resources you're using for gas to get to a location, even if you're, as I'm pedaling my mountain bike, I'm still impacting. Everybody has an effect on our resource. So long story short, we do lots of conservation. Those are just two of them right off the bat. Two large ones, obviously, the land and wildlife. But we are definitely a conservation on how can we wisely use our resources. And that's what Colorado Parks and Wildlife does for the state of Colorado. And and that's our mandate. That's our mission, and that's what we deliver.
Coming from the world that I come from, before I was in conservation, I was selling ranches, and now in conservation, both of those I'm dealing with private landowners. And it's really worth noting and kind of drilling it in to people who may not be all that familiar what a great partner you guys are for private landowners. I mean, you've got this public land and you're doing so much with that, but everything from funding for conservation easements on private land to the Ranching for Wildlife program, which was a big, that was always in my world when I was selling ranches. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because it seems like that is a very unique program. And I don't know how it compares to what other states do, but the ability for these ranchers to open up their land to select hunting and then, earn some income off of it. And then also, open up land that otherwise would not be open. It seems like that is extremely unique. Can you talk about that program?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks. I hadn't thought about that in this discussion, but one of the good things when you have as many gray hairs as I have is you have a lot of history. And so I do joke with my staff that, history and looking in the rear view mirror is good. So with some sense of history, but you don't want to spend too much time looking in the rear view mirror. You're going to get in an accident if you're driving. So with that being said, Ranching for Wildlife is a program that at the core is designed to keep ranches in ranches and effective working ranches. And I'll explain that a little bit, but the ranch, really the highest and best, most expensive turnout for ranches to be some subdivision or somebody putting a trophy home on there. And, that's been going on in Colorado and around the country for years and years. But specifically Ranching for Wildlife, and I'll enough history. It actually started over a disagreement between the old Forbes Trinchera Ranch in the state of Colorado. The Forbes Trinchera Ranch was owned by Malcolm Forbes at the time, and they wanted to put a 8 or 10 foot fence around the ranch. This is in the San Luis Valley. And at the time, this is actually prior to me. I'm not that old, Ed, but just before the state of Colorado had a big disagreement about with that ranch, really, that you can't fence in the resources, animals that are wild and owned by the state of the citizens of the state of Colorado in a private ranch. So that's a little different than some other states, notably probably my friends in Texas. So we had a kind of a pitched out battle about that. And so the ranch, and we are great partners with this ranch. It's not a negative whatsoever. They said, okay, if we can't do that, we'll subdivide part of the ranch because they've got to make a living. And they were creating issues for themselves. They're creating issues for us. They're creating issues for wildlife. And eventually some calmer heads sat down and said, how can we jointly work together to manage wildlife on this ranch that's a benefit to the ranch and benefit to the public? And so the tenets of the Ranching for Wildlife are really pretty simple. We allow them some expanded dates to have a hunting season on their ranch. And for that, so it's just expanded dates, so they don't have to push a bunch of people on the ranch in a week or 2 or 3, like we generally do around the other on the public lands. That's oversimplified because we have lots of different seasons, but this is mostly about the rifle season in October. So they get a longer period of time to do that. What they have to give up, though, is a significant habitat component on the ranch that's specifically for wildlife benefit, not just ranch benefit. And they have to open that ranch up for the public for free to come on and enjoy portions of that ranch. And we have that in our hunting brochures every year about Ranching for Wildlife. So that really is the tenet of that. Most people have no idea that started over an argument about fencing wildlife in. And what's happened, though, there's some criteria, of course, which ranches can be in, but that's really opened up these big ranches that can help them stay on the landscape so they don't have to make decisions. Of course, we're not telling them they can't, if they want to sell and create a subdivision. That's really up to them. That's not our business. But we want to be partners if we can be, if they want to use wildlife consumptively or not on that ranch to help them stay in business. So again, that's just one of many programs. We've got a private lands program. We lease private lands, which is an economic benefit, and it's good for us. We ease land. We've got the Ranch and Wildlife program. We partner on how to plant living snow fences with landowners, et cetera, et cetera. We've got just fantastic biologists that work for the state of Colorado that will partner with lots of different private landowners on help them manage wildlife on their property.
I didn't realize that history at all. I didn't understand. I didn't know that there was that background with the Forbes Ranch down there. That's really really cool to hear, and it's just another example of how great things can come out of challenges, which is nice to think about given the challenges we're in right now.
Kind of rolls us back to the partnership thing at some degree. Is that's what that was, and it still is. We are still a partner with. Now it's just called the Chinchera Ranch. Louis Bacon is the owner, wonderful person, and the Forbes no longer own it. And it's just still it's our first partnership in that. It's probably one of our more storied relationships, and yet it was a little testy back in the 70s and 80s over that. And but through adversity comes revelation sometime, and so we work on those.
You're in it every day, and you have been for basically your entire career, and you're grinding and getting this work done. But if you are ever able to stop and kind of zoom out a little bit, do you view Colorado and all this work that is being done as extremely innovative on a national level? Because from my perspective as an outsider, I do. And I don't know the ins and outs of, what Wyoming's doing or Montana, but at least in the land conservation world where I work, I feel like we're kind of the tip of the spear as far as figuring out new ways to do things, new approaches, that can then serve as a model on a national level. And from watching you guys from afar and working with you, on different projects over the years, that's the impression I get of CPW. I mean, is that you're modest and you're in the middle of it, so I don't know what kind of answer you're going to give me. But do you view CPW as setting trends on a national level?
I would say for sure yes, and I also through associations, I know my other counterparts all through the United States, but for sure mostly in the West. And so lots of states are doing really innovative things. And someone says that in the National Football League is that it's like the copycat league, that whatever somebody does that works well, everybody's copycatting. And so there's always going to be some of that, but managing recreation and specifically wildlife is as much art as it is science. If it was hard science, it'd be a lot simpler. What's true today is different tomorrow in its same geographic region. So with that being said, we definitely, I would say, work hard at, I wouldn't say the word luxury, but we financially are in better shape than most states because people, again, want to come here to Colorado. They want to come here to recreate. They want to come to buy a second home, which, as you all know, causes some issues when you have a pandemic. But people want to be in Colorado because of the natural resources and what we have and what we provide. So along with that, at some level, we capture that financially. We're a self-funded state agency. We really get very little, almost no, and I can explain that, no general fund tax dollars. So I don't want to harp on that, but no matter how much we talk about that, no matter how much we try and publicize that, yes, we are a state agency, but your tax dollars don't pay 1 cent of my salary or those 900 people's salaries. That we are a self-funded agency on the Parks and Wildlife side. So we've got to be good at business. We don't get general fund to do our jobs, and we're glad to do that. So we have to be fairly innovative. And so I see a lot of things that we're working on, like I said, whether it's conservation, we have robust research. We can afford to do that. A lot of states can't afford to do that, or they farm out what little research they can do to co-ops within universities. And we have our own. We still have a great relationship with our universities too. But I could continue down the list of the things that we work on that are pretty innovative. But again, some of it's money. Some of it is maybe I'm full of adages today. I'm stuck in the home too much, but necessity is the mother of invention. And when we have this many people, I like the tip of the spear too, is that we have this many people and that many pinch points around the state. You better be pretty good at staying ahead of that or managing to that, or you're going to get inundated and not do your job. And I won't be the director very long if I don't, stay ahead of as best I can some of those curves. And some of that, it's not very. But my new favorite saying in this pandemic is, at Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we're working hard to manage to yes. Mm-hmm. No is simple, but we're going to work to managing to yes, figuring out how we can serve our customers while keeping them safe and our employees safe. Now, that's more of a COVID thing right now, but it is a mindset that as we see things propping up, as we see issues and or opportunities in the state of Colorado to do a better job to accomplish our mission, we're just going to jump on that.
That's all very insightful, especially given the current circumstances. And I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about you personally and how you ended up in this position that you're in, because I've done some research and we have been in some meetings together in the past, but I know you come from a family who's been closely tied to Colorado Parks and Wildlife in one way or another. Did you always want to be in this business as a kid? Was this kind of your dream, or did you have other ideas? How did you end up where you are?
That's a good question. I'll for sure answer it. It's visceral to me. I wouldn't be here if I didn't love what I do. I'm well past potential retirement age, and so I'll go back. My dad did work for the old Division of Wildlife. Matter of fact, he worked for the old Game Fish and Parks, as I talked about in the 70s divorce and marriage of our agencies, and so. He had a different tact. He was very successful. He's still around. He lives in Carr Springs. We get to see him now and again, less now because of the travel. But he came through a different avenue through the agency. He started in research, and then you'd have to know him to understand that. But the director way back at the time, Jack Grebe, said, "Why don't you put your money where your mouth is?" And the decisions are made at the manager level. Why don't you see if you put chirping in there and see if you can be a manager? So he jumped from research into planning and management and ended up as the deputy director of this agency. And so maybe in the middle of his career, as I was growing up, I'm not sure it actually had anything to, that's not taken away from him. I had to write a report in junior high, and I got something from the Division of Wildlife, a pamphlet, and I wrote a report about the 1973 Endangered Species Act. And people know me probably think, man, I never heard that. But I wrote a report and it got in my head. And then I met some game wardens hunting. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be a game warden. And so I went to school at Colorado State University and got a degree in wildlife biology and a minor in range, because I also worked on a ranch. I call it the historic but very functioning Graves Ranch and Dairy in Bellevue up by Fort Collins. And so I was having a little, probably TMI, but I was having a little debate in my head. Do I want to be a rancher or do I want to be a game warden? And I eventually sided with the game warden, finished my degree, luckily got hired in Colorado. I thought I'd have to work somewhere else, but just kind of got lucky and got hired here and started my career. So I went through training and was a game warden in Castle Rock for 4 or 5 years, and then I promoted to be a supervisor in Meeker, Colorado. I still own a home and will move back to Meeker. That is my home. My wife and I, Brenda's home. We just don't live there today. But Meeker, Colorado is special in our heart and the Northwest Plateau there. So shout out to anybody from Meeker that hears this. It's the elk capital hunting of the world, but we just love Meeker. So we lived there for about 15 years, and then we moved to Colorado Springs as a regional manager of the Southeast region. And I was starting to toy around the idea of ready to move back to Meeker, and the director job opened up when Bob Broscheid decided to take a different job. And so, I'm going to put my hat in there. It's a long shot, but I've got, as you can tell on this, I got a mouth, I think, a brain, and I'm going to see if I can put my energy in my mouth and my brain to work for the benefit of state of Colorado, which is very near and dear to my heart. So, and for all of Colorado, and for all our agency, and for all our employees, and for those 6 million people plus the visitors that come here, and that really is not a platitude. I have a customer service face. Now let me rephrase that. I have a customer service. I'm facing customer service. I think that's really important. I have a service attitude and enjoy working with people. There are days that being a public servant is hard and frustrating, but for the most part, it's a rewarding mission to do that. And most of our employees work for this agency because of that mission. It's not because of what we pay them. I can tell you that.
Well, that was one question I had, thinking about your father's role and then your role. And then before we started recording, you were talking about one of your daughters is a nurse. And so it seems like there's this service mindset that is in your family. I mean, was that something that your dad really talked about and played up as an important role, as an important, kind of aspect of a career is service, or is that just kind of an unspoken thing in your family and y'all have chosen to pursue these careers that make the world a better place, really?
I'm probably that's a very personal question. It's probably a little of both. I think some unspoken things. We were raised to do good things, for lack of a better term, like a lot of people are. But the spoken part of that, I suspect, if I think back about that, is about service to others. And if life is just about me, I've lost, and it's not. So I do live that. I try and live that as a personal life. I try and live that as a director. That I'm not. I may get some accolades or get to do some things that some staff won't get to do as director. But if it was about me, I've made a mistake. This is about moving our mission and our agency and just creating or preserving what you and I had the benefit of enjoying. And that's kind of, way back to the partnership. And so at some level, yeah, I think as we talked, I have a daughter that's an ICU nurse right now. She's in the thick of things. So, I have another daughter that's a mother. And so she's raising children to be, like her parents and her husband. So I don't know. It's a good question. I get a little emotional when I think about my oldest daughter right now. But we're all in this together. It's not about us. Last I checked, the meek will inherit the earth. And so I try and resemble that as best I can.
In our meetings for conservation type things, I mean, it shows, and that's one of the things that I've loved, in my transition from selling these fancy ranches to the conservation, is I'm just surrounded by people like you and people like your team that are focused on a mission larger than themselves. And, all my colleagues at Palmer Land Trust are the same way. And it's, I think I was 40 years old when I made the switch. And, sometimes I think, man, what the hell took me so long? 'Cause it's a whole different level of fulfillment, that comes with that. Thinking about the lessons you learned kind of starting kind of at the bottom, for lack of a better term, and then working your way up and getting to know all the different aspects of the job and the different aspects of what people on the ground are doing, different parts of the state. What are some lessons, kind of leadership lessons, or what has made you a better leader by having that career where you've just worked your way up year after year after year and gotten to know all different aspects of the organization?
That's another tough one. I know a lot about a lot of things, and I'm not an expert in everything. Like, I talked about the difference from my dad, and he came from the research side, and I came from, law enforcement side. But our law enforcement officers are multi-purpose, so they're doing game counts and land use comments and education every day, besides some law enforcement. And so you get a very broad background as a multi-purpose person through at least my part of this agency. But I think part of that, being willing to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, understanding it takes all types to make an agency function. So as I talked about, being humble or meek, people say, well, I don't think I see anything meek about, Director Prenslow. And at a personal level, there is some truth to that. But at a more visceral level, it's if it's about, as it's about me, I'm done. I'll resign the next day. It's about how we can accomplish that goal. And so I have learned through those years, and probably some of my upbringing, it takes really all types. It takes people that have vision that I can't fathom. And I might be a hard charger in one part, but then have learned to say, just learn to take a breath to my employees, to think about that, and try not to react till you've had a chance to sleep on that. And so you get some of those partly from wisdom and going through some battles, and some of that maybe it's just age, and I get a chance to think about some of those things. But I probably got a little off track. But you get some of that. I've had some great mentors in my career, internally and externally. I've had support that you wouldn't think you would have, just out of nowhere. It's people that currently, and they're going to listen to this, they're like, yeah, I helped, Director Prenslow. And so I think for me, the way I'll end that, Ed, because it's again, we can talk about anything, and I don't want to talk about me much, but is that I actually never chased this job. If you'd have asked me about director, I put in the time before and this last time, but I had a hard time leaving Meeker. That was the toughest decision we made, and I thought, well, the kids are in junior high, and should we do the career thing a little bit, or should we stay? And that was a tough decision. And each one of those, for every one, I've not had a ton of different jobs, but I'm not going to walk over anybody or do anything to get to that job. And I think that's how, if you ask me how I got here, or why I might be even partly successful, is that it's not about this job. It was still about me doing my job for this agency and for the people of Colorado to provide the resources. And I'm selfishly providing them for myself too, right? I want to go out there and recreate and hunt and fish and bike ride and hike. And if I do that well, I get to enjoy that too. So I'm not so altruistic that I'm not doing that for myself too, but I'm not gonna step on anybody to get that done. So, and I think at the end of the day, I think that maybe came through somewhere.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I've had a lot of people in leadership positions on this podcast. And 2 or 3 episodes ago, I had a former Navy SEAL on who is now a business person, and he, his thoughts on humility and serving the greater good and the purpose. I mean, there are these universal lessons that come through, and it's very inspiring for me to hear. When you think about your team, and it's kind of a 2-part question. There are a lot of people who would love to have a career like yours and be involved with CPW or other state agencies throughout the United States. What what do you look for in people on your team when you're hiring somebody? And then kind of a second part to that question, what would be your advice to say somebody that's coming out of college or coming out of grad school that wants to get into your world? What are do you have any advice to offer people like that?
That's a great question. Didn't see that coming. And before you ask it, I thought, you know what? I'm going to put a shout out to all of our employees, but my leadership team has and along again with every employee, that I'm not diminishing that, but our park managers have been out there every day through that. We've kept parks open. Matter of fact, the governor gave my boss and I an accolade, and it's real in his state of the state there a couple days ago, and about keeping parks open, which I appreciated very much. But that really, back to our point, that goes to my employees. That didn't go to me. That they did that. They worked hard at keeping open so people have a place to go recreate and hunt and fish to keep sane through this. So you're going to hear a train in the background. So hopefully it's not too loud. But my leadership team has really worked through that hard. If you think I'm the only one working and losing a little sleep, crazy. I wish we didn't, but we are. And so, and back to philosophy, I tell you what, if I would be proud as punch if anybody on my leadership team, so I'm going to hire the best I can. And if and when they can take my job from me, that would make me happy. Right. I've heard people say, well, I'm not, I don't want to put too many people there. They'd replace me. I think that you couldn't make me happier than for me to hire somebody that does a better job than I will. And if they're ready to do that, I'm ready to get out of the way. And so that really is a very true statement. I have people like that. The whole leadership team is like that. So we're working hard to keep pace through all the things that we're doing. And so you ask about traits, at least for me, loyalty is a big thing for me. Brand loyalty, kind of ride for the brand in this agency is a big deal. And we have it. That is, we have accountants that work for us because of our mission. They can work anywhere they want, but they like our mission. And so, we have engineers, we have biologists, of course, but we have administrative people, and really almost to a T, every one of them is here because of our mission. So hard work, loyalty, not to me, but to that mission and to that mission-driven mindset. And I could go on and on, but that would be a couple of them. So as far as people coming on, we have an internship program too. If you're at that age, about college age, you really ought to look into that, because a significant portion of that internship program is to get people in the pipeline. A lot of people want to work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, but we don't have that many jobs. And quite frankly, we're very selfish. We want the best of the best. And for the most part, we hire the best of the best. And so I would say part of that, you ought to have, don't come here if you don't want to work hard. If your goal in life is to make the most money and he who has the most toys wins, don't come work for us. You won't really get rich working for us, but you'll be fulfilled, at least at a work level. Right? There's some other parts of life that you're going to have to work on fulfillment on your own. But a mission and having a agency that believes in kind of one direction for mission it's a great agency to work for. And so I would encourage that. The other one is for anybody, just be really good at communication at any level, whether you're going to be a park manager or an administrative assistant or an engineer. Be good at communication, because we do serve the public, and that it's that service first attitude. For the most part, you have to be able to communicate with our visitors and your coworkers and be a good team member to be able to do that. So I would think about that. It's not about you. It's about the mission and us.
As a leader and working your way through the organization for your whole career, both internally and externally, I would imagine that I know at least externally that there are a lot of competing stakeholders with competing interests. And I would think, at least with the Partners in the Outdoors conference, one of the goals of that is to bring together all these people and find common ground. And in your experience and all the different experiences you've had serving this organization, what are some of I don't know if you call it a trick or a technique for finding common ground between people who may not on the surface get along? I mean, is it getting physically together in the same room, which is part of what this conference is, and just talking it out? Or how have you found ways to find common ground when maybe at the outset it seems like there's not common ground?
Well, so I think I've touched on a couple of them. One, you can't do it if you don't communicate. Sit in your corner and box it out. There's a resolution there, but there's usually a winner and a loser. And so communication is such a huge thing, whether it's in person or on phone or whatever it is. And I can joke about it. Email, not really a communication tool, and neither is texting. It's a good dissemination of information, but I wouldn't call it a communication tool. So communication, I think I also touched. Leadership, shared risk, shared reward. So it's nice to have the same vision, but you work at partnership, and I started that earlier. And so we wanted to expand our partnership, and because we're not always in sync, with everything that either goes on or that people are in sync with what we do. But you find out that you usually have more in common than you have not in common. And so, but you won't know that if you don't talk about it. You don't work on that. And so I think those are kind of the tools of that, creating a venue where you can do that. Partnership is a great example of that. It really is kind of a signature thing. I don't know really of anybody that's gone to our partnership meeting that really has said that's not the best one I've ever been to. And part of that, at the end, we asked you for kind of, I know we were ready to this year. What are you going to commit to, Ed, in the next year to work on improving this partnership? And so I think that's a personal thing. I'm a firm believer in asking for somebody kind of for a personal commitment. What can you do to improve that? I'll give you a quick analogy since we do have at least an hour. Is that I learned that, talk about learned lessons. I went to a conference where the CU football coach, Bill McCartney, spoke at. And before each game, he would go in and ask every individual player on that football team, what are you personally going to provide in this game for the team's benefit? And he would get them to enunciate that, think about it, and say it out loud. And think about the power of asking for a commitment out loud, whether it's public or not, that you say, I will get that done. And that was a way he motivated his players, and that always stuck with me. And I think you just work on those again with communication and all that stuff. It's just how you do it. If you sit in the room with completely different interests and roll up your sleeves and decide that you're willing to give or you're willing to get, but you're willing to have that conversation, I think it's amazing what you can come out with. That's not just a platitude. I heard somewhere else, and it was pretty poignant for me that it's, and we have to do this at commission meetings. I have to do this at our leadership team meeting. You have to do this with employees. But if you, this is a little off track, but if you have a process, and people will tell me I am process oriented, and I learned that in the merger of this agency. I didn't really know I had such a process mind, but process matters. And here's why. If you violate somebody's process, so people are used to getting good or bad news. Everybody wants good news, but you put in for a job, you don't get it. You're disappointed. I get it. But you don't seek revenge. And I use the word revenge or retaliation not lightly. But if your process gets violated in that process, because you don't think you got a fair shake, you go from being disappointed on an outcome to seeking retribution or revenge. And so, as a leader, I think hard and long about how to include people as best I can in every process. You can only do that so much. I get it, but process matters. I would tell everybody that's not specific to my agency. That's just life. Is think about including people where you can include them, and let them communicate. Yeah, you might not, you have the right to be heard, but you might not have the right to prevail. But the right to be heard is a very important part of that process. And you'll reap the dividends of being open to that communication, facilitation, collaboration. And yeah, sooner or later, somebody has to make a decision. And some people like it and some people won't. But most people will live with that if you were fair about that process. And I think if I could leave anything with that today, that's probably the best I could give you.
I love that. And whether you're working in conservation or whether you're working in business, whatever, I think everything you said there is completely applicable for anybody who is a leader. And I got to figure out a way, whether it's writing a book or what, to consolidate all this wisdom that I've gotten from the podcast, because it's it's so valuable for me, very selfishly for me. But then I think a lot of other people get so much value out of that. So thank you for sharing that. We're coming up on an hour, and so I obviously want to be very respectful of your time. I've got a few kind of quick questions that I like to ask at the end, and so maybe we can run through those, and then we'll get on with it. I read a ton of books, and I'm always looking for good book recommendations. In your life or career, either personally or professionally, are there any books that have been impactful to your development as a leader?
Yeah, that's a good one. You got me on that. Bible first and foremost. We want some real wisdom. Start there, but you're going to stump me on that. I've had a couple on leadership. Organizational leadership. I've read a couple here recently on organizations, and part of that was about merger, and part of that I just don't have it here in front of me, so I'm not going to be able to give you the author and just moving organizations. And short answer comes down, for at least for me, in that process and communication thing. So I've been working on that. I read a book about which one of my commissioners gave me, which I really helpful, was your first 100 days as a leader. That was a fantastic book to kind of focus your energies on how to kind of just have your agency know that there's a change, but have it seamless, but have it with a mission purpose, a decisional purpose, not just look what's changing. Why are you changing it? Why are you not changing it? What's the benefit for the agency and your mission or your economics, as I talked about? We've got to be mindful about how we manage parks and wildlife, or we won't be in business to provide the outcome. And that's something we take very seriously.
So kind of a final question, and you don't have to give away any secrets here, and you may have already answered it with Meeker, but if you had to pick one favorite spot in Colorado, and it could be a favorite stretch of a creek for fishing, could be the top of a certain mountain, could be a town, is there a certain spot in Colorado that has a special place in your heart?
Oh boy, there's so many, but yeah, I probably gave it away. It's right around my house. I overlook the White River, up the White River Valley above Meeker. And so that's, if there's a certain spot in there, that's probably it. But the benefit of living in a state and working for the state of Colorado and going around is I've gotten to see, I haven't seen all of every little nook and cranny of the state, but I've, the canyons of the Southeast, the farm ground, which I love. There's something just wonderful about agriculture that feeds our nation, but the ag fields in the Northeast, just the plateaus of the Northwest just are, if you haven't spent any time, the desert, high desert, but the plateau country, flat tops, but all the way down into Mesa County. And you get in the Southwest Colorado, just large expanses. I went over right in the beginning of this pandemic just to take a quick tour around the state to just talk to employees as best I could with my social distancing, by the way, and just to get a sense of how we were doing. We were having to close offices but still work with the public. And I went over Red Mountain Pass, hadn't been over for a long time, and there was like one car on the road. And the sun was coming up and out of Ouray and hitting the San Juans, and there's a pretty good snowpack. There was no ski area runs on the thing because everything's closed. It reminded me probably what it looked like 20 or 50 years ago. So no traffic and not a ton of things going on in the middle of winter. Gosh, it was. I got to tell you, I don't do that a lot, but I took a couple pictures. I'll share them with you. So they were pretty cool sight. Everybody was home.
Well, this is really, really great. And I can't thank you enough for your time today, but more importantly to you and all of your team members, dedication to what you do. Because, I mean, like we talked about, I moved here from North Carolina to be outdoors and to enjoy these natural resources that we have here. And I just absolutely love it. And it doesn't just happen. It's because of the hard work of y'all. And so thank you very much for everything you're doing. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
I'll be glad to do it again if I didn't cover anything or you would like to expand on something. And I absolutely look forward to working again with you and the Palmer Land Trust on continuing our conservation message and our output and our accomplishments in the state of Colorado. So I look forward to working with you in that vein too.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.